We have Josie Morrison, who is a Wheaton real estate agent for over 30 years here in Wheaton, and her panel of experts on all things preparing your home for sale. So I'm going to hand it over to Josie. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. All right, so let's just get started here. So our panel of experts tonight, we've all worked together for many years, and we have first up Dan Rock with Guaranteed Rate. Myself will be next. We're actually going to move around the home inspector. He was not able to join us tonight, so we have his portion filmed. And so we're going to add his at the end. So we'll do the home inspector at the end. And then we'll have Donna Kane, real estate attorney. And if you have any questions, again, Courtney's going to be fielding those. She'll read them off to me and then whoever your question is directed to. But if you have some brief questions in between our in-person audience, I can possibly field those as we go. So let's start off with Mr. Rock.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Rock from Guaranteed Rate. Pardon my voice. This is the best it sounded in about a week and a half, so you'll have to bear with me. We'll get into a little bit about what we could do from a lending standpoint here. So some of the questions we get are when we have older Americans, they ask about what can we get qualified for? How can we get qualified? What is usable income? And so anyone over the age of 65 or anyone who is retired, we can use alternative sources of income. You don't have to be a W-2 employee to get financing. So some of the things that you can do are we could use your pension, of course. We can use Social Security. That's a common question where people ask if they can get financing, if their income comes from Social Security, and we could use it. We can actually gross it up. Most of the income we look at is going to be gross income. So Social Security, if that is your only source of income, will come to you non-taxable. So we can gross it up to count more income for you. We can use dividends. We can use interest. We could use capital gains if there is a history of that. There are many types of income that we could use. We can even have you take your IRA and you can set up an automatic distribution where every month you're getting the same amount of money, and we can count that as income as well. Even if you don't need it, we just have to set it up for a month or two, and then we can count that as income. So market conditions, yes, the market is insanely hot right now. So what we're seeing a lot of people try to do is buy a new house without their current house being sold. So we would have to qualify people with whatever their existing housing debt is, whatever their existing normal debts like car payments, credit card bills, et cetera. And then we'd have to qualify them with the new house payment as well. We can also do bridge loan financing, which feels like a term from the past. We used to do those many years ago, and it's come back around. So a bridge loan is going to be forwarding equity from your existing home, using that as your down payment on a new home. So we could do those again. Mortgage rates right now are roughly 4.125, give or take an eighth, depending on what the credit scores are, what type of property, how much you're going to put down, what your loan amount is. That's really what's driving interest rates right now. And of course, we're seeing the highest inflation in 40 years. So that's having an impact on rates as well. So when we talk about sources of down payment, especially if you're looking to buy a home without your existing home being sold, we can use the bridge loan. You can use margin loan if you want to. You could do a home equity line of credit. You can borrow against a 401k. So you could get a gift from family members too. So we could use any of those as a down payment. As far as getting a loan done, we're seeing really two ends of the spectrum. We're seeing people want to get their loan approved and closed within 3 weeks. And then we're seeing a lot of people that want to take 3 months to get their home done. So we could do long-term locks for 90 or 120 days to be on that longer end of the spectrum. or my processing staff could get things done in 2 to 3 weeks if you need to get done that quickly in order to win that offer, win that bid. Loan options, there's tons of different options. We're not really into an ARM market right now. So most of what we're seeing are 30-year fixed or 15-year fixed or somewhere in between. I think we will see ARMs come into favor again, and those are available, but it has to make sense. You have to be saving enough money to have a trade-off for the security that you're sacrificing. This kind of shows what their expectations were of rates. And we've really blown through all those rates right now, all those national averages that they expect. So where are rates going to go? With inflation continuing, I think we're still going to see rates push up. Obviously, Ukraine and Russia is having a big impact on all the markets right now as well. So I would say by the end of the year, we could be pushing up around 4.5, maybe even higher, depending on what the Fed does. They're poised to raise rates next week. So that is going to be something that we have to keep an eye on. I think we're back to you, Josie.
All right. Now we come to the meaty part of the presentation. So I've been doing this presentation here at the Wheaton Library for trying to figure out at least 5-6 years. We did buyer programs for many years. And then when it switched to a seller market, we started offering both, and then we dropped off the buyer portion. So now we're just doing sellers because the market has really evolved into a whole other animal right now. So we're going to kind of break things down. So just a little bit about me, who I am. I've lived in Wheaton for over 30 years, raised 3 kids through the Wheaton schools, service all the local markets around Wheaton as well. Love what I do, and my certifications as well. One of them being a senior residential expert. So I've got some great resources for seniors. That's what this program is mainly designed for, but it can go across the board to any age bracket for selling a house. So when COVID first started, this was the biggest thing on everyone's mind. What's going to happen? There was a lot of uncertainty. Things kind of shook out over the past 2 years. We were in a seller's market before COVID started. It just kind of made people really look at and redefine their space. Is this house too big for me? Everyone was working from home. So it kind of made the whole nation on a move. But all the industry experts are predicting we're not in a housing bubble. It's not going to burst because we don't have the same dynamics that we had in 2006 to 2008 to make that market burst. There's a lot more lending restrictions. There's a lot more safeguards in place to not have that happen. And with appreciation going up, most people are now recovered and have more equity in their home. So just a couple of quotes from some of the industry experts. Average house sale prices will continue to rise. So this is Freddie Mac, National Association of Realtors. So I like to list the sources of where some of this information is coming from. If anyone wants copies of the slides, or because I know we're going on a faster pace, be happy to send anyone some slides or additional information regarding some of these statistics. Cost of construction. Part of the reason why we have this great shortage of inventory is due to the fact that most builders stopped building when the housing market did burst back in 2000 to 2008. So they stopped building, then they started building when the market switched into more of a seller's market. But then we started seeing all these supply shortages. And the cost of lumber has more equalized now. It's come down, but it was through the roof. And so that was driving all costs up as well. A lot of the builders were getting delayed because they couldn't get materials, they couldn't get appliances. You had all these shipping shortages. So that created then an additional shortage of homes to purchase. Yeah, if everyone could silence their cell phone, that would be great. That would be great. So next up, so one of the things during COVID is I was, sitting and looking at webinars and looking, listening to experts. One of the things that they had predicted was urban migration. So years ago, city brokers never came out into the suburbs, and suburb brokers rarely went into the city, but we did. Now we're seeing droves. All the city brokers are coming out because people aren't necessarily buying in the city. They're all coming out here. So that's what's driven some of this high demand as well. So we have shortage of inventory. Interest rates are still historically low, even though they are increasing. And we have urban migration. So it's a triple, the perfect storm to drive prices up here locally, because all markets are local. And that's where we have to look at what are the demands, what are we seeing in the local market? So that's where, last thing too, rental prices for rentals. People are starting to now get costed out of buying a home. So the demand for rentals has gone through the roof. And if you see a lot of new construction going on, they're building apartment complexes like crazy everywhere because of the shortage of housing. And a lot of the buyers, if you don't have a good down payment, you're going to have a really hard time competing in the market against all these other buyers. So we have a lot of dynamics happening into the market. So being a seller in this market, you can have your cake and eat it too, basically. So we look at what's happening nationally. So if we look at this chart, and for some people, they say on average 800 people a day are moving to Florida. Florida house prices are through the roof, through the roof. They were increasing over the past couple of years, but as you see, the inventory, we have more of a shortage this year than we saw last year. So with less and less inventory, more and more demand, it's simple economics. Prices are going through the roof. So the affordability index, which I don't have on here, is becoming increasingly harder and harder for that first-time home buyer to buy a house because costs are just being driven up so high. So if you're looking to move out west or some of these other states, you can kind of see year over year the inventory change. So here's where I like to break down and really define what are the buyer trends and patterns. And this changes from year to year. So one of the master sales groups that I'm in, and some of the agents from my office that are in this group, we're in different markets. So we have these meetings and we talk about what's happening in your market, what's happening in your market, if they're further south or from the city. So we've kind of broken it down into age brackets of who are the buyers, who's making up the buying pool. The largest percentage of buyers in the marketplace are still the first-time home buyers. So the ages, they're having to wait longer and longer to save and to get in that financial situation to purchase. It's pretty rare to even find anything for 125 anymore. Really, locally around here, your basic one-bedroom condo is going to start about 150 plus. And then they have assessments on top of that and taxes. The competition is absolutely fierce in that first price range because first-time home buyers are up to about 400,000. Those are for young professional couples or just a professional that has a good income that's going to be up to the 400. But actually, I should probably change that range because it should be 150 to probably 450 now. Again, it's still evolving. The market is not the same that it was 2 years ago. The buying trends have been modified as well. 2 years ago, buyers were willing to negotiate price, so was sellers. Buyers were willing to pay extra and pay a higher amount if they didn't have to do any work in the house. Now, most buyers are having to buy the house as is. Because most sellers in this marketplace, again, having your cake and eat it too, most sellers are selling it as is. They're getting appraisal waivers. They're having these offers stacked because the competition is so fierce. And so for the average buyer wanting to try and get that first time house, they're pretty much having to do a whole lot more work than they were willing to do 2 years ago because of the dynamics of the supply and demand. So move up buyers. If 2 years ago, if you had a home to sell first, that was more easily done. In this market, most sellers are not taking a home to close contingency because there's enough buyers in the marketplace that have nothing to close. So why take an offer and take on that additional risk of someone that has to close their house versus someone that doesn't? And there's a lot more cash in the market now because people have had to close out on that house in order to free themselves up into the market so they can go and purchase and be competitive with the other buyers. Case in point, there was a townhome in Naperville listed for about $300,000. There was multiple offers on the property. My buyer was 20% down conventional. We bid $15,000 over asking. The agent notified us. Of course, my buyer didn't get it. They had 35 offers and it sold for $25,000 over asking on a basic townhome. It wasn't all that great either. But that's some of the dynamics, some of the crazy stuff that's happening out in the marketplace. I could spend all night talking about that. But the competition is fierce, absolutely fierce. But the reason why I break down some of this stuff is because I want to educate, if you're in the market to potentially sell your home, to have this kind of information and knowing the dynamics of the marketplace, to be aware you have a lot more choices than you think you had 2 years ago. So it's a great thing, but it's a great thing to be a seller, great thing. And that's the great part of, if you have a house to sell, everything sells at the right price. So most sellers are thinking that they have to do a lot of work to fix up their home. Not so much in this market, which is a great thing. But to be a buyer is not so great. Because especially if you're trying to do both of them at the same time, we've got to really look at the timeline of how can we do this the best as possible for you. So that's pretty challenging. Any questions on this one that you could think of? Okay. Most investors, flippers, they're kind of not in the marketplace anymore. They're in shock. They're kind of sitting on the sidelines. They were hoping the market would bust or hoping a bunch of foreclosures would come up because of all the deferred, what's that term, Dan, that the government was doing, the mortgage deferral? Yeah, a lot of people were doing that. So some of the experts were saying, well, that could be a dynamic in the marketplace. None of the experts or the housing advocacy people are saying that is not on the table, because with prices being raised up so much, there's a lot more appreciation. Nobody anticipates a lot of foreclosures coming to market. So all these investors, there might be a rehab type of thing, but I sold an estate down in Lockport and it needed to be completely gutted. We had 10 offers in 2 days, a cash buyer, an investor. He paid over list price and he got it. So if the investors have a realistic expectation of their costs, then it makes sense for them. But most of those guys are sitting on the sidelines now. So things to think about on getting your home ready and reasons for moving. There's a lot, people have a lot of different reasons for moving. Every house on the market may be a different situation. Not everyone's moving to Florida or Arizona. Those are the big ones. Or the Carolinas. Those are the other ones. So it depends on what is the reason for selling. One of the first things, if you are considering thinking about selling, is to hire a real estate broker. I would caution anyone from trying to do this on their own without an expert, because you could easily be leaving money on the table with not knowing the negotiating and knowing how to negotiate and what you can negotiate and what you can't negotiate. So one of the handouts I have in the back of the room is questions, qualifying questions. If you're interviewing agents, brokers, ask them questions. It's basically when you're looking to hire any contractor or any expert, you want to at least talk with a couple of them and you want to interview them. Most savvy people that you want to protect your asset, your greatest asset, you want to work with an expert. Everybody and their brother today has a real estate license. There's a realtor on every corner in every state. That's the easy part. It's being good in sales, being good in communication. All you have to do is potentially Google someone's name. If they don't come up online on that first page with all their information or their websites and so forth, how are they going to market your property if they can't market themselves? Fees and charges. There's no question's ever a dumb question. And you want to ask, because not all brokers, when you're interviewing them or they do their market analysis for you, are going to break down all the costs associated with selling. So that's something that you want to ask for too. It's like, I would like to know exactly all my fees and charges, because a brokerage fee is not the only fee as part of closing out your house and the closing costs. There are additional fees. Again, communication, look for who do you feel most comfortable with? Who do you think is going to be addressing your concerns? And who is going to be responding to you quickly? Because some agents, it's frustrating for me as an agent too. Some agents don't pick up their phone most times. You want to be able to be responded to if you've got questions, concerns, whether it be text, email, or phone calls. You want to be, this is your greatest asset. You want to make sure that that person is working for you nonstop until it closes. Marketing programs should be in writing as well, not just, oh, here's what I'll do for you. You definitely want to be able to, again, vet them as best as possible. A broker should be able to estimate the value range of your home. Again, all markets are local. You don't want to necessarily hire a city broker if you've got a house in Wheaton and their main market is in Chicago. That's their market in Chicago. A lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, sometimes we'll see that where it's a family member or something. That's a different situation. But again, knowing how to push the envelope. When I meet with a seller, sometimes I'll say, look, we want to squeeze every possible dollar out of your house because again, it's your greatest asset. This is the time when you can maximize your profit on your house because of the dynamics of the local market, and knowing not just what the house sold for next door, but looking at the whole market. So if you have a 4-bedroom house in Wheaton, we're going to look at all of Wheaton, not just in your little section right there, because most people aren't looking in one specific spot. They're looking in all different locations. Only if they're looking in a specific location, if their children are attending the school and they want to keep the same schools. That's really the only situation. But with this shortage of inventory, most people are keeping their options open and they're looking in multiple areas. So we look at the greater market and we look at in turn, the immediate market to see how much can we push this pricing. So we negotiate with the buyers, brokers, coordinate all the paperwork, and they should be able to provide you resources to help you with contractors or painters, to help provide an ensuite of services, a one-stop shopping for you. I like this graphic chart. So all the different players kind of involved in a real estate transaction. So it's not just a buyer and a seller. We have a whole army of people. So whether it be coordinating up front with photographers or doing a pre-home inspection. Most people in their offers today aren't asking for warranties. 2 years ago, every contract that came in had a home warranty. Now people are trying to keep their offers as clean as possible because they want to win the bid with the seller. That's why most sellers can get negotiated in an as-is contract. And we'll talk a little bit more about as-is down the way. All right, ready to move. The hardest part for many people is to get started. That's why if you start and talk with a broker, sometimes people get overwhelmed. I know I've fitted my house for 28 years and I've been weeding out things for a couple of years now with kids moved out. It can be overwhelming, absolutely. And you might think you have to do a whole lot more things than you actually do. So dealing with an expert, we can kind of come take a look at the house and say, yep, I'd say focus on this. Don't worry about that. And try and break it down for you as best as possible. Because we do this every day, 7 days a week for many years. People sell their homes maybe a few times in the lifetime. And again, the market evolves, things evolve, trends change. So that's where having a broker come in first and say, okay, let's talk about what you want to do and how long you want to do it and how quick you want to do it. So that's why that personal timing analysis is crucial. So it's, when do you want to be in Florida? Okay, before the winter. Well, if we're in the fall, then we want to sell sooner than later. But most people are kind of afraid to sell their house if they don't know where they're going yet. So you definitely want to have an idea of where you're going. So then we can look at that personal timing analysis. I'm a big advocate of lists. That's why I've got the notepads back there. Making your lists. Again, a broker should be able to help you make your lists on priorities. So recent improvements, that's a big one because most buyers today, when they come through the house, the agent is going to send us over some questions and say, well, how old is the furnace? How old is the hot water tank? How old is the roof? If you know some of those things, start making your lists. That's one of the forms that I give in my presentation when I sit down with the seller to begin with is, here's a cheat sheet of furnace, and just start, as you're going around and you're doing your cleaning or you're weeding out, start writing things down. If you don't know some dates, that's not a problem. But it's best to your knowledge if you get some of those dates or recent improvements, especially if we're pushing value. We want to have the recent improvements so that we can give that list of recent improvements to an appraiser to help the house appraise. If we are pushing the envelope, and we are definitely pushing the envelope with most homes on the market now. Updating or remodeling. A lot of people would ask, well, am I going to get my money back if I change the floor? Not necessarily. Again, this is where in this market, simple things that don't cost a lot of money is great. And that's what I advise. Putting 5,000 to 10,000 or more, I don't advise that because most people are going to come in and redo stuff anyway. So instead of putting cheap carpeting in, maybe you just have the carpets cleaned and let the new person come in and do what they want to do. So having some professional opinion on whether you need to do any updates at all. Sometimes paint and cleaning is all you need to do. If some people get overwhelmed with that too, especially if they've been in their home for a very long time, there's lots of clutter. If they don't want to do anything, we can price for condition. So you don't necessarily have to do anything other than maybe weed out some stuff. We can price for condition and go from there. Or I just, one of my listings in Glendale Heights, seller needs a new roof. He's got a leaky roof. Doesn't have the money to do it. We offered a credit. Let the new buyer do that. But for that circumstance, an FHA buyer would not be able to buy a house that has a leaky roof. So we could only sell it to a conventional or cash buyer. But we still had a workaround where we were able to sell the house. We're closing it next week. And we took care of that. So even a leaky roof we can deal with. This is one of probably the biggest things of consideration. That's why I've got a whole package of information back there about decluttering, because really we want to be able to, for the buyer to come see the house as much as possible versus stuff. A lot of people, including myself, we have a lot of stuff. We have storage, we have closets, not necessarily concerned about closets or garages. Those are great places to put the stuff, but your main areas, living space, we want to have it as clean as possible. Don't have to move out. Some people, because of COVID, they want it to be moved out. People come through. We were considered essential workers when everything got shut down. So we've been working, same thing with lenders, attorneys. We've been working through the whole thing. People have been moving. People have been buying, selling. We've been doing it all. We've just made some modifications. So this condition of your home does affect the value and sellability. Now, sellability, not so much as value. So depending upon what needs to be done in your house, again, getting a professional assessment for that. Some people, especially estates, that we've done estates, I recommend not to have the whole house cleared out, because a vacant house doesn't show as well. Even if you have a few rooms with the furniture, is better than nothing. If it has to be nothing, that's okay. We can adjust for that. But depersonalization is important too, because we want the buyers to be able to see themselves in the house versus, you know, pictures of grandkids all up the hallway, or, you know, just over an excessive amount of personal things, mainly photos or wedding photos or other things. It's best to just keep it as neutral as possible. A few things, not a lot. I always like to tell people, you know, if you've got a lot of artificial plants, take them out. Just try and keep it as neutral as possible. Landscaping as well, but we can't do anything about that now, not until May or June. So I wouldn't worry about landscaping if you're looking to come to market sooner. So one of the things that I always come back to is what you need on a daily basis, you can keep in the house. What you don't need, pack it up, store it, label it. Again, places to put these are either basements, I don't like storage units because it costs money. But if that's the only option, then a storage unit. Basements, garages, friends, family. Can I use your garage for a couple months? It's best to start packing things up. You're moving anyway, you got to go through it. You might as well work on doing some of that now. This is just an example of a timeline that I did for one of my sellers. So this is a 30-day. And we came up with this basically together. It can vary in order of things to be done. But deep cleaning is probably one of the most important things that I would say is, even if the house is dated, let it be clean. Because that only shows that a house has been well taken care of just by how clean it is. That really does affect when buyers come through. Again, I like visuals. If you're looking to hire movers, as we get into more and more of the spring market, movers are hot properties. It's hard to line up movers sometimes because there's only so many local movers and everybody's going to be using them all at the same time. I recommend getting a couple estimates from different movers to see. They'll come in and take, assess what you're willing to take. But especially if you're looking to move out of state, it's cheaper to just sell it off or donate it versus paying movers to move it. If you have electronics, you definitely want to take some pictures of that based on how you're going to put it back together. And there's estate sales are back happening. There's lots of places like Goodwill, Jubilee Furniture. I serve on the board for the Warrenville Youth and Family Services. They have their donation pickups. They'll come on Saturdays. They're also connected with Jubilee Furniture and the community's outreach community of industries. There's a lot of agencies that will take different things. So you just have to ask them what things they are taking and what things they aren't taking, because all places aren't taking all the everything. Some places won't take clothes. Some will just take good furniture that they can resell. So those are good questions to ask too. So if a property is vacant, we can do virtual staging. So my photographer, when they take the room, they can then virtually stage it. I would not virtually stage the whole house, but if we have two major rooms, say a kitchen or living room, then we could possibly do a virtual staging. So it's online, it gets the people to the house, and then they can do their own placing of their own furniture when they see it. So if a house has to be vacant, it's not the end of the world, we can do some virtual staging. Not every broker does their staging, or they'll say, well, you can hire someone to do staging, or they've got someone on their team. But most times that's going to come at a cost. So just moving around some pieces of furniture can make a world of difference. As you can see, I've got another slide here too. Same room. We just took out some clutter, took out some additional fabrics and pictures and colors and plants, and some of these big standing plants, they should find a new home versus stay, or maybe you leave it for the new buyer, put it in a different room. But simple things like that doesn't cost any money to do, but it makes a world of difference, because the majority, if not all buyers, find their home online. So we want to make your house look amazing online. And sometimes we'll even get to the point where they say, wow, the pictures look so much better. Well, that's our job of marketing to get them into the house. So again, not a lot you can do right now because everything just looks dirty and ugly, but there are some things that obviously would cost some financing to do some retaining walls, or having a big giant tree removed so you can see the front of the house. Sure, some things can be done modestly. We don't want to have you investing big amounts of money in landscaping, because the new buyer will probably come and do something different anyway. We want to spruce it up. Again, we want to give the impression to a new buyer that the land has been well taken care of. Again, affects value. So one of the books I have in the back, the book is the edition is about 2 years old because I hadn't gotten the new ones, but basically the information is the same. I'm going to leave them with Wheaton Library. There's about a case of them if you have some people that might be able to use them. It's a great resource if anyone needs those. Any questions for me on this part? The next one is our home inspector, but we're going to move him to the end. So I'm going to page through his, and we're going to have the real estate attorney come up next. Donna Kane.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Donna Kraft Kane. I am an attorney. I've been an attorney since 1988. So 30, coming up on 34 years here now. And my office is in Villa Park. I have a general practice with an emphasis in real estate. So I, on average, do about 300 closings a year, both sales and buys and commercial transactions. So normally as the attorney, we get involved once your offer has been accepted, or you either selling or buying. Sometimes people have unique situations and they'll reach out to the attorney ahead of time. I have had issues where clients have title issues on their homes. And it's helpful if we know ahead of time so we have time to work through those issues. So what does the attorney do in real estate transactions? Not all states do are attorneys involved in real estate, but here in Illinois, it's an attorney state. And so normally on the sales side, we get the contract, the attorney is going to be responsible for ordering the title, ordering the survey, ordering any association documents that are required, ordering the payoff, preparing the documents for closing, as well as preparing the figures for closing, and then also negotiating with the buyer's attorney on any inspection issues when representing a buyer. There are some changes normally as buyer's attorneys will make a request on the contract. For example, one of the things that's not in the contract is making it contingent on the property appraising for the purchase price. Some loans like FHA and VA, they have to, but unconventional, it's not necessary all the time. Or not that it's not necessary, but oftentimes the buyers can still qualify to purchase even though the property doesn't appraise out. But as the attorney, a lot of times I will still ask for that because people don't like paying more for a property than it's been appraised for. Also, the buyers are going to do their inspection and the attorneys will negotiate the inspection items. So from the time the contract is signed to the time of closing, the attorney is extremely involved in coordinating everything and making sure that everything moves along, as well as working along with the lender to make sure that the loan process is moving along, making sure that if there are issues that as attorneys that we can help through to do that. So there are some important dates to understand within the contract. We use a standardized contract that the realtors and the attorneys put together. The most important one is you have a 5 business days for doing the inspection. Right now, with inspectors being so busy, sometimes it's hard to get those inspections done in time. So sometimes we have to ask for additional time to do the inspection. The other thing is one of the things that a lot of buyers want to do is a radon test. The radon test takes 48 hours. So sometimes we have to ask for an extension for the to be able to conduct the radon test. Once the inspection is done, within that 5 business days, the buyer's attorney will send any requests to the seller side. One of the things right now with the seller's market, I have to caution buyers, let's talk about this and, try to focus on those health and safety issues. On the sell side, I'll have to remind sellers, yes, it's a seller's market, but it may be worthwhile to make some of these repairs because those are things that most buyers are going to ask for. So as the attorney, we'll talk through that with the realtors. I usually get the realtors involved as well because they've seen the property. I haven't. On the other hand, I see all the inspection letters coming in, so I kind of know what the hot issues right now for inspectors that they're finding, and I can kind of gauge that as well. Once we reach an agreement on the attorney review and inspection items, there's one of the other contingencies that's in the contract that people don't pay attention to a lot is buyer has 10 business days to make sure that they're going to be able to get insurance and not required to have flood insurance. Oftentimes buyers don't think to talk to the insurance agents, or they'll just kind of get a quick quote and not really have the agent look into the actual binding of the policy. That insurance is an important part of their mortgage process because obviously they have to have insurance, and the cost of that insurance is going to affect their loan approval. And there are certain things that can affect the ability of the buyer to get insurance. I had one deal where the house had been struck by lightning as well as hail damage. And the buyer had some difficulties getting the insurance. And I'm like, well, surely lightning only strikes once, so there should be not an issue here. But we ended up actually getting the insurance through the current insurance company. I recently had a buyer get denied for insurance because they had filed too many claims on their current home. And they had sold their home and they were buying another home and they had some difficulties. They paid a little bit more of a premium. So it's a thing to keep in mind when people think, well, I'll just go ahead and file that hail claim because somebody came around. They want to be sparing, I guess, on the claims that you file. Also, if a seller has filed for an insurance claim, that can affect the buyer's ability to get insurance or the cost of the insurance. Depends upon the circumstances, but that's a common question as attorneys, and our attorney review for buyers is we ask what claims the seller has filed within the last 5 years, and what were they for, and has the work been completed, has it been paid for. The next contingency that's in the contract is the mortgage contingency. The contract provides that the buyer is supposed to have their loan approval within 45 days of when the contract was signed, or 5 business days before the closing. And basically the 45 days usually comes into place if we have a 60-day like closing date. Most contracts, it's 5 business days beforehand. And so it's real important on the buy side that the buyer is, cooperating with the lender, providing all the documentation that they get. As I tell clients, I said, keep a folder, because invariably they may ask for the same thing twice. Of course, Dan's team doesn't, but other lenders do. But it's important for that communication part. From the seller standpoint, I have to remind sellers, patience. Not all deals go smoothly. They don't all close on time. So we have to have some flexibility. Things happen that we don't have any control over. Sometimes there's hiccups in that loan process, or various things happen. And so we all have to just be a little bit patient in this whole process and work towards those closing dates. Most closings do happen on the contract date, but not all.
Hi everyone, I'm Stu with Stu's Absolute Inspections. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you this evening, but I've been asked to speak with you regarding some of the important issues and reasons why to have a pre-inspection done before you get ready to sell your home. So there's a few slides that I'd like to go through to go over some of the reasoning why this would be a good idea for you to do. First off, obviously, to find out about any issues before your home goes to the market, so that you can do some repairs yourself or have time to budget for them instead of being surprised last minute, especially if finances are of a concern. I know a lot of people think that, hey, maybe we can avoid all of this by just selling the property as is, which, it seems like a good idea, but you got to think about it from a buyer's standpoint. When they see the word as is, they automatically think there's something wrong with the house. So that's generally going to cause them to want to put in a lower offer or try to, devalue your home a little bit, ask for a reduced price. Makes the people feel a little bit more uneasy that maybe there's something there that they can't see, that you're trying to hide from them. So it just makes everything a little bit more cloudy, and it's really unnecessary if you're feeling confident about your home. Which can save you big money, because then you can, if you're confident about selling your home, you can be confident about asking top dollar for it in the market, which is huge in today's marketplace. Next slide. So why have a home inspection? Well, in any case, the person that's coming in to buy your home is definitely going to have a home inspection. I'd say probably it's got to be over 90% of the home purchases out there today are going to have a home inspection associated with it. And those people are going to come in and find issues with the home. I don't care if the house was built yesterday. There's always something to be found. It's job security for me. But the thing is, you could send in 5 home inspectors into your home, and not one of the inspections is going to be the same for all of them. But the main things, the important things, the most the largest major concerns or repairs that are over $500 should be pretty much similar on all of the inspections. So that's what we're really interested in. The individual inspections that come in and nitpick little things here and there, that's to be expected. But you want to find out about the bigger issues that you may be unaware of. And you might say, well, I've lived in my house for 20 years. I know everything there is to know about it. Well, if you're not trained to know what some of these things look like, you could be living, they could be right in front of you, and you just might not be aware that it's an issue or non-issue. I can't tell you how many times I go into a home and people have cracks in their foundation, for example, and they think, oh my gosh, this is going to be a huge problem with the sale of my house. I have all these cracks in here. And I tell them, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they're just normal cracking from shrinkage or settlement of the home over the first couple of years. And unless you have seepage or something coming through them, it's generally a non-issue. And if you know that before you get ready to sell your house, it sure makes you a lot more confident about them in the house, and not allowing yourself to get beat up by a prospective buyer or their home inspector that may bring them to your attention. In that aspect too, those visible defects may be more or less serious than you think, and that's a perfect example. The home inspection also gives you kind of an unbiased look at your house, because so many times we get used to seeing defects in our home and we just kind of overlook it. It's like, oh, that's not a big deal, where sometimes they can be a big deal. Some little areas of rot or something around a door may seem like a little thing, but those can actually be signs of much bigger problems below them that obviously you might want to get corrected before another home inspector comes in and points them out and turns what could be a $400 or $500 repair into a $1,500 credit that they want to ask for, which typically happens, when someone finds those type of issues. Of course, they're going to get estimates and repairs from the probably more expensive people in the market to give them some room to negotiate. By doing these inspections as well, they give you the ability to make informed decisions about the repairs and how you want to handle them. Even if you decide not to do them, say there was wood rot around a door or something that is going to be an expense, at least you're prepared to negotiate that. You know what the realistic cost is to, say, repair a door or replace a door, repair a window or trim or whatnot. So if someone's asking you for a $1,500 credit for something like that, is it a reasonable estimate or not? Because you've had your time to really look at the repair, talk to your own contractors to know that, hey, yeah, this is reasonable in the market, because if people are asking you these things during your 5-day inspection period with everything going on, if you waited, or decided not to do a pre-inspection, you're under the gun. You've got 5 days to try to figure this out, make a decision. Maybe you knew about the issue, maybe you didn't. So by having that extra time just gives you so much more confidence. It's going to make you feel so much more relaxed when that actually happens, that that you've addressed these issues. Another huge thing that I'll find a lot of times when I do pre-inspections is suspect mold or issues like that. Those are the big things that I really want to protect you from with the pre-inspection. Like in attics, places that you generally are not going to go as a homeowner. You're not spending time in your attic, hopefully, or in your crawl space, and those are common areas, obviously, to find problems because nobody's in there. If I found suspect mold or something along those lines in those areas, you have time to get someone reputable to come out and do that work. Unfortunately, in the world of mold and whatnot, you can get estimates to repair and clean up and repair stuff like that from anywhere from $500 to $5,000 for the same repair, just because it's just kind of the wild west out there. And you want to have time to find a good reputable contractor that is reasonable to get those things taken care of. It's much better on your end before you sell it than it is to have the prospective buyers, potential people, take care of it generally. It's going to be more expensive, and then they're working under a gun with the time frame. And obviously that always can add up to a higher expense when people know you've got to get things done. And especially with today's market, with the just everybody, all the contractors that are out there are so tied up and busy that it's hard to get them to come out to begin with. So, that's a huge reason to have a pre-inspection done. once, I think once a pre-inspection is done, you're going to find that you do have some peace of mind, knowing that someone was through your home, that's independent, that is not affiliated with your realtor or the buyer's realtor, to give you an unbiased opinion of the home so that you can feel a little bit more confident during that whole process. Because like I said, it is a very stressful period of time under that 5-day window. So if you can get it done beforehand, it's always a good thing. If you guys have further questions for me, Josie has all of my contact information. I'm usually pretty accessible via email. If you need phone calls, I can do that too. I usually can call in the evening when I'm done inspecting, but I'm more than happy to help out anybody any way that I can, or if you need quotes. Generally, a typical single family home inspection is usually around $425. Radon testing is something else a lot of people ask about. Generally, with a pre-inspection, I don't recommend doing a radon test, because if you're not, if you're not aware of it at this point, it's not something you generally have to disclose. Not every prospective buyer is going to be interested in a radon test. So, there's no need to make something, or give them information about that if they don't care about it. If they care about it, they're going to test, and if it comes back high, then you can deal with it at that time. But that's a highly regulated industry. The typical mitigation system these days is about $2,000 to $2,500, depending on what work needs to be done. So I would just worry about it at that time. That's one of those things I would leave on the back burner. But once again, Josie has my contact information. Thank you guys for your attention.
All right, so we've got a couple questions already, and then I'll take some questions here. Getting back to stacking offers. So again, this is kind of something that evolved in this market. So when, the average home, if it's a nice home priced well, they're seeing about 3 to 4 offers minimum within a short period of time. And stacking offers, not all offers are good offers. So even though you've got 3 or 4 offers, they may be not so great. What I normally do for sellers when we're in a multiple offer situation, I create a spreadsheet so that we put all the highlights of each offer. So we look at prices and everything. Some people are bidding crazy amounts on some of these houses that, they might want to do an appraisal waiver, but unless they can prove that they have a good chunk of money on top of their down payment that they're supposed to be putting down, just because they say to do that, their liability is what they would lose their earnest money if they defaulted, and then you're back to square one. So not every offer is great. So you've got an as is, you've got an appraisal waiver, and or an appraisal making up the difference between what it appraises for. So that spread, that difference. Good down payment. A lot of times, first time home buyers are putting minimum 3 to 5% down. Is that offer going to be better and stronger than an offer that's putting down 20 or 10 or 20%? So that's something that you've got to, consider. So looking at all the aspects of the offer, not just what they're offering on price. The other thing was if you have or know of big problems like Stu mentioned, cracks in the foundation or slight seepage. We've sold houses with slight seepage. We disclosed it, the buyers bought it, and they knew about it. So if it's best to deal with that kind of stuff up front, or a leaky roof or whatever, deal with it up front so that everyone's on the same playing field, versus getting, 2 weeks into a sale and then it's an issue that we can't resolve and then it goes back to market. So we definitely don't want to have to necessarily go back to market, but sometimes it does. So with a lot of this feeding frenzy of some of these offers and some of these agents not counseling their sellers properly, we're seeing properties come back to market or get reactivated because it wasn't handled properly to begin with. So that does cause a lot of issues. Any other questions from chat, or we'll take some? Okay. Any questions here for the attorney or mortgage broker? Yes.
Okay, so basically, on the buy side as the attorney, um, it's one, partly is, um, in negotiating those inspection items. It's kind of hard when you don't have an attorney to, uh, be able to present those issues to the seller and to be able to deal with that. The other thing is especially these days, working along with the lenders to make sure that all those dates are being met. And so if, like, for example, tomorrow I have a mortgage contingency that's up. I reached out to the lender. They're not going to have their clear to close tomorrow, so I'm going to have to request an extension. Oh, sure. Sure. Sorry. I forgot to do that. So for the online, so the question was, first time we bought a house, we didn't use an attorney. What did we risk by doing so? So and I was explaining that as an attorney, I'm going to be negotiating those inspection items. The other thing is when I get a contract in, I do some research too on behalf of the buyer to make sure I look at the real estate taxes to see what exemptions the seller is getting, because some exemptions may go away after the closing. If the seller has oftentimes on these flippers, they bought it from somebody who maybe was a senior. They got the senior exemption, they got the senior freeze and the residential exemption. For real estate taxes, January 1st is what determines who is the owner and whether or not those exemptions are going to be applicable for the following year. So some of those exemptions are huge. And so that's one of the things I often, I look at, see what exemptions are out there. Are they going to still be in place after my client owns the property? And if they're not, negotiate that as part of the attorney review to make sure that my client isn't going to be paying more in real estate taxes than they should the following year, or to at least prepare them for that. The other thing is I will look, usually at DuPage County in the fall, properties are reassessed. This last year, the reassessments came in at 5 or 8%. I had a property, a client was purchasing in Cook County last week. It was a 50% increase on the assessed value. So that could potentially, their taxes could be 1.5 times what they were. Normally we prorate taxes at 105% because in Illinois we pay taxes in arrears. Cook County is normally 110. So in that case, I asked for it to be prorated based upon that new assessed value. And then right now the attorney and I are negotiating, like setting up an escrow to cover it. The other thing I always look to see is the property in a floodplain or not? Because sometimes sellers, like I've had sellers who they never had to have flood insurance because they, bought the house 30 years ago. Well, FEMA redoes those flood maps every 10 years. And so maybe now a future buyer would require it. The seller said they weren't required. And so I just always re-verify to make sure, is it in the flood map? So the other thing, if a party is buying a condo, one of the things is the attorney, the contract just provides that the seller has to provide a copy of the declaration bylaws and a 22.1 disclosure, which provides some financial information. Usually when I'm representing buyers, I ask for like the last 12 months worth of minutes. So we can see what's been the discussion at the board level about issues in the condo. I'll ask for a reserve study if there's been one done, so we kind of know what repairs the condo associations are anticipating him to make. So, and the other thing is reviewing the costs. I've often been able to save clients money because there was fees being charged to them by the title company that weren't required. So I'm trying to get those removed or making sure that the tax expirations are properly calculated. Oh, sure. One of the questions is what are attorney fees? Okay. It varies. As in all things, I charge 400 for closings. Some attorneys, will charge $600-700. And, some attorneys, you'll get, if you put your house on the market, you're going to get a letter from an attorney that's going to tell you they're only going to charge you $195. Well, but they're going to charge you for other things along the ways. Or they'll increase the title fee. As attorneys, we're all agents with title companies. We do get paid by the title company for some of the work, but each, what you get paid varies based on the title company. And so, and then sometimes attorneys can adjust the fees that the title company is charging, and so that they'll make more money that way. So, yes, but as part of that too, as the attorneys, we're also on the sales side, we're clearing title. So when we get the title search, we'll see, are like I've had situations where the seller's deed was never recorded. They're not actually in title. So we've had to track that down. I have one right now. They thought that the title was in this trust. It was never put in that trust. So now I have to do probate to clear up the title issues. I've had ones where, especially like during the 90s, people refinancing every other year. And so there's a lot of old mortgages that are still against the property. I've had ones where there's various liens, maybe they didn't cut the weeds, so there's a weed lien and things like that. So, encroachments, yeah, as attorneys, we order the survey. And so sometimes there's issues on the survey. Driveways are on other people's properties. I had one a couple of years ago. The seller had a fire, and they rebuilt their deck 5 feet onto the neighbor's property. Over a 5-foot easement, and then also 5 feet into the neighbor's property. This was a massive deck. So we had to work out that issue with the buyer. I had one recently where the neighbor's, my client's garage was on the neighbor's property. So, yeah. So, those are kind of fun issues as attorneys we get to work at.